Hello guys, today we'll talk about payments in Filament with Stripe. So imagine you have a public page with a buy button for some object. In this case it's a property, but this is kind of a global example to buy whatever, and then when someone wants to buy, they land on a Stripe payment form inside of Filament. It's actually similar how you would implement that in Laravel outside of Filament, but the question is how to style it inside of Filament page. So let me show you. First, in that outside show blade, outside of Filament, we have a link. But link to where? We have a Filament booking resource in the tenant admin panel, and we have the URL buy with a separate page. So it's not a list page or a form page, it's a separate custom page within that resource, and we pass the record of property ID to purchase. Now if we go to that booking resource of that tenant panel, in the list of pages, we have only index of bookings by tenant and then two custom pages, buy booking and payment status. Inside of buy booking, we do the same thing as we would do for Stripe. Outside of Filament, we will use a library called, if we go to composer.json, stripe-php, the official stripe-php library. So we don't use any Laravel cashier in this case. And to set up that Stripe client, you need to provide Stripe secret in your .env file and create this Stripe client, which will then perform all the actions inside of the same class. Now, mount method for this page is kind of initializing everything. So we need to initialize stripe.js, another official library. Then we get the data of what we want to buy, and then we get client secret. That client secret is another protected method in this case, which calls a few more methods. So it's quite an extensive class. This sounds complicated, but this is almost exactly as I said, as I would do that in Laravel. So client secret is received after you create Stripe customer and create so-called payment intent. Stripe customer is created by name and email of logged in user. Then that customer has its own ID, kind of ID inside of Stripe dashboard. This is the one, Stripe customer ID, so we update that in the user table. And then get payment intent is kind of identifier for this specific payment for that specific customer. And then on Stripe dashboard, you would see whether that intent was fulfilled, basically the purchase successful, or it will just stay an intent. So we get the payment intent, or if we don't have it, we create a new one. Again, everywhere we use this Stripe as a client, calling its functions. Here we provide the customer, the price, the currency, and also we pass property ID, which we will then receive in so-called Webhook after the payment is successful. So then we would assign that property ID to the tenant. And that's it from Filament point of view. Also on top you can see view by booking, which is a separate blade styled like Filament page but with Stripe JavaScript. So if we look what's inside, we have Filament page, then we have payment element, which would be automatically filled in by this JavaScript from Stripe. So this is the place of the form, and then all we need to do is to add a Filament button submit to pay now. So this is rendered by Stripe JavaScript with the credentials that we prepared and with the intent that we prepared in the Filament page class, and we just render the submit button for it. Then at the bottom we need to add quite a lot of JavaScript as well. This is again pretty standard thing of Stripe integration into any PHP project. Another configuration option, so there's Stripe key and Stripe secret. So Stripe key is public, but we'll still put it in .env file, and then we create Stripe elements. This form is called Stripe elements, and then we need to provide the return URL for what should happen after the payment is submitted, and a few more JavaScript functions like set loading, show message. So we work with plain JavaScript and call Stripe confirm payment after submit. And let's try it out. I'll fill in the form with testing credentials, and let's click pay now. We have the page payment succeeded, which is another Filament page within the same resource. As you can see, payment status. So we were redirected to the route of payment status. We have Stripe JavaScript again, and then all the success notification is in payment status blade, which is again Filament page, but with JavaScript with check status, also using the same stripe.link library and showing the message depending on payment status. But that is not all. The transaction succeeded, but we didn't fulfill the actual purchase of booking object for tenant. And for that, after successful purchase, Stripe calls so-called Webhook URL, which you need to provide on Stripe dashboard. And this is our URL. We created that in a separate routes API PHP because it doesn't happen within the Filament, so we don't need Filament at this point. We have just Stripe Webhook controller. And again, pretty standard thing of Stripe configuration and Webhook management. So we have the event from Stripe, and then we check the signature parameters, and then we have match event type if it succeeded, handle payment intent succeeded, and this is where we have from metadata. If you remember, we passed those two as a parameter, user ID and property ID. And here we can assign the booking. And that webhook should not return anything, it's just for Stripe. In this case, it returns no content, which means 204 status code. And any 200 status code for Stripe means okay, success. And at this point, our purchase is successful. Of course, there are many more details, and I've just run through that JavaScript, but that was the goal of this video, the overview, so you would understand the different parts of how it may be done. This is, of course, one of the options. Or have you integrated Stripe in a different way in your Filament panels? We can discuss in the comments below. And if you want the full source code of this project, again, a few videos already on this channel. This is video number 3 about this project with Filament tenant room booking, with its code available for premium members of Filament examples, as well as other many projects. That's it for this time, and see you guys in other videos.